I can. You were live, so
Okay, so Barksdale I sent him a link. Attendees are muted. So if you want to pose a question, please use the chat box at the bottom of Zoom, or you may have a Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. Uh, this workshop is being recorded and it'll be available on Preservation Delaware's website in a few weeks. And if you're not a member, please do consider joining us. With that, I want to introduce Barksdale. He's no stranger to Preservation Delaware's annual lectures, given many presentations for us in the past. He is the author of 7 University Press books about American history, art, and architecture. I have 2 in my office within arm's reach that are go-to references for me. His recent book, done in 2021, is Artists of Wyeth County, and it's a rare, unauthorized biography of Andrew Wyeth that is banned at the Brandywine River Museum of Art. But that aside, I can assure you it is extremely well researched. Currently, Barksdale is teaching at the University of Delaware, which hosts the W. Barksdale Maynard Photographs of Delaware collection online. We'll be seeing that here in just a sec, and I will post that link down in the chat here in a little bit. I've had the opportunity to take one of Barksdale's architecture classes in the University of Delaware, and we're past neighbors here in the neighborhood of Sharpley and North Wilmington. So thank you again for coming to the conference, and I'm going to turn it over to Barksdale.
Thank you so much, Gene. Kara, my name is spelled wrong in the little icon there, if you could check that. But thank you all for being here. This is the Halloween special, Delaware's most frightful buildings. I've put a disclaimer at the bottom. This work is parody and humorous. These are statements of opinion only, not fact. This is based, I suppose, on my collection of photographs of Delaware. As I told you all last year, I've driven all over the state. I've taken pictures to try to record what we have in Delaware before it disappears. And I've now got 1,604 photographs, all Delaware, all available to you online. I hope you'll use this collection. It's been interesting to see the whole state and to see a lot of changes. Just for example, we have one of the last unaltered mid-20th century airports, maybe certainly in the country, unaltered, but yes, they are currently altering it. I see this sort of thing everywhere. And of course, already alluded to this morning was the alteration of the Trabant Center by the Venturi firm. You know, how do you explain to a university administrator what postmodern is and what Venturi is and why these letters are not just letters, but something actually critical to the entire postmodern design of this building? This is a ghastly alteration, and it's frankly an embarrassment that they've ripped these letters out. I see a lot of beautiful buildings as I go around Delaware. That's not the theme of the talk today, but rest assured, there are beautiful things to see. And I've seen a lot of them. I've also seen some rather spooky sights appropriate for Halloween. So I offer you this house in North Wilmington as your Halloween treat. I would not want to go trick-or-treating at this one particularly. And if you like Victoriana, I like Victoriana too. And so I've got a lot of Victorian cemeteries and a lot of Victorian ironwork in the online collection. Again, perfect for Halloween. Now, this old postcard says beautiful homes along the boulevard. And we talk a lot about beauty, don't we, in architecture? We're interested in preserving beautiful old buildings. That's the whole point of the preservation movement. But as we talk about beautiful buildings, I think that we talk amazingly little about ugly buildings. Why don't we talk about ugly buildings? Why don't we care about ugly buildings? Why don't we want to preserve ugly buildings? And I think psychologically, it's kind of interesting to ask, why is a building ugly? Like, why do we universally look at this sort of thing and say, my goodness, that's dreadful? what makes a building ugly? And where's that fine line between kind of interesting and truly awful? I see a lot of ugly buildings as I go around Delaware. This one is so eccentric and so amusing. It might be in the category of just truly, truly fun. As my teenage son said as we drove by, what did they do to my girl, Wendy? Wendy's got a new lease on life here as a lone Max. If you go online, people are interested in this question of ugliness. There are a lot of surveys. For example, they've figured out the ugliest animal in the world. Clearly, the blobfish is the ugliest animal in the whole world. The ugliest building in the world, according to the internet, is this bank, somewhat worse for the wear, in Estonia. This, folks, this is the ugliest building in the entire world. No, it's not that house in Newark, Delaware. This is the Obama Presidential Library in Chicago. You've been reading about it in the paper because it's cost a lot more to build than they expected. The Obama Center has been called ugly by some. It's even been compared to a trash can. Not yet finished and yet already getting derided by the critics. Now we're going to get a presidential library in Delaware, the Biden Presidential Library. I think that's extremely exciting. I don't think it's going to be ugly. I think the bigger risk is that it's going to be pretty little because they're having trouble raising the funds. I have an inside source that actually has leaked to me the advanced plans for this building. It's on the more modest side for a presidential library. Now, what's the ugliest building in the United States, according to the internet? The ugliest in the country is the City of Flint Municipal Center. So naturally, I was curious, how bad is it? I mean, I've seen some ugly buildings. How bad is it? Well, it's not that bad. It's just modernist. And you get into this problem when you start to talk about ugly buildings, because the ones that the buildings that everyone seems to hate are the modernist buildings, even if they're not bad modernist buildings. On that list of the ugliest was a building in Philadelphia, the Municipal Services Building, by an important architect, Vince Kling. How bad is it? For modernism, it's not bad at all. It's pretty decent. If you want to see a really, really, really ugly building and you're in Philly, look at the building next door to this. Now that's really ugly. That's almost unbelievably unattractive. The ugliest in Delaware, according to the internet, and according to Gene Castellano, I happen to have an inside scoop here. Gene Castellano has an aversion to the Rollins building. Don't even mention it to Gene. It looms over his neighborhood. According to the internet, it sticks out like a sore thumb, and it looks like a giant adobe brick prison. Now let's first cross off the list the buildings that are unfairly vilified. These are the ones that you think are ugly and they really aren't. That would include the IMK building in downtown Wilmington. A lot of people think this is ugly. I think this is a great example of brutalism from the 1960s. Brutalism is an interesting architectural style. It's one that you ought to learn to appreciate because it was innovative and it was rigorous. And I think brutalism is exciting, the way the shadows rake across these massive concrete walls of the IMK building. So don't call this one ugly. And don't call this ugly either. This is a library along Kirkwood Highway. And when this library was built by a Princeton firm just a few years ago, lots of people commented to me that this was so terribly ugly. In fact, they got so many comments on it, they've planted about 10,000 trees in front of it. So this library is no longer visible to the human eye as you drive by. But this is a very good building, especially as seen from the automobile at high speed. And besides, the design of the library is meant to remind you of books stacked on top of each other. And I think that is totally adorable. And this is a good building. This is another good building and another good example of brutalism. This is the science building at Sanford School by the Holmesy firm, 1960s. This is great brutalism. Brutalism is about making the walls massive, heavy, thick. Brutalism is about masonry. Think about architecture in the 1950s. It was about aluminum, glass, lightness. Brutalism is a return back to Roman architectural virtues, the heavy wall. Look at how heavy the walls are here. Look how the windows are set way back. Look how the windows are supposed to be a deep, dark void inside the heavy masonry walls. Look at the exposed concrete at the roof, the exposed concrete between the first and second floors. Heavy. It tells you how the building is built. You see it on the outside. You look at that little pavilion in the foreground with just a thin sheet of glass across the front. That's supposed to be a very light counterweight to the massiveness of the architecture. Now, rule number one about architecture, never fall in love with a building, because when you drive by, they will have done this to it. And this is what they've just done to the science building at Sanford School. Whoever did this does not like brutalism. The concrete is gone. The windows no longer sink into the void. The pavilion is as clunky and chunky as it could be. If you love brutalism, this will break your heart. Scary schools. Why is school architecture often so bad? Now, we have great schools in Delaware. We have the PRS DuPont High School. If you haven't walked around the PS DuPont building, this is one of the greatest high school buildings in the country in terms of its architecture, 1930s. But when you get after the Second World War, something goes wrong and you get Newark High. This is not an attractive modernist building. I'm a defender of modernism, but not really this one. This is the view of the old Wilmington High School, now Charter School of Wilmington, that my kids see every morning as they walk from the parking lot to the school. This is the inviting presence of their alma mater. Now, this is the back of the building, but it's really, really bad. 1960. The front of the building, though, Old Wilmington High, is superb. This is one of our really cool modernist compositions with these Le Corbusier-inspired steel columns. Terrific in the front, but lousy in the back. We happen to have in Delaware, and this is a special treat, what might be the worst looking school in the entire country, with, I think, even the slightly unattractive name, but it's pronounced Gouger Cobbs. Gouger Cobbs. This is a representation of a short-lived educational trend in the 1960s, which is the school with no windows at all. That's right. No windows at all. So if you don't believe me, this is the front of the building. I couldn't make this up. This is the front facade of Gouger Cobbs School. Extraordinary. Here's an aerial view. No windows. None. This is so extraordinarily inhumane to the occupants that it just honestly makes me feel sort of tenderhearted towards this as just an excruciating example of a bad experiment of the 1960s. But of course, being so special, this is another rule of architecture. Whatever is super exceptional and super quirky is sure to be the first thing they tear down. And the wrecking ball is on its way for Gouger Cobbs. Go see it if you haven't. Yes, they're going to tear it down. And they're going to replace it with an extremely generic looking many windowed building, as you see there at the bottom. RIP, one of the great weird Delaware buildings. I don't want to pick on Sanford School, but I think the design of the sports center, it's less architecture than it is flip art applied to the facade. But the worst of all has to be, can you guess the name of the school, given that they give you the name of the school in letters about 25 feet tall? It's a perfectly good modernist building of around 1960. I mean, a really intact modernist school, but somebody I think was embarrassed by the modernist rigor. And so they give you this colossal thing at the entrance with weirdly drooping light fixtures and crooked lettering of a really bad font. This is exceptionally weird. But scary civic gateways. Now, by civic gateways, I mean when you drive into a town, what's the first thing you see? You drive into Philly over the Platte Bridge, and the first thing you see is a post-industrial wasteland of vast scale. This is a terrible civic gateway. How does Delaware fare in this regard? Well, you come into Delaware from Chester County, very sophisticated, Chester County, very wealthy. You come into Delaware, it doesn't even say Delaware, it says Brandywine 100, which actually I think politically isn't even a thing. That's a new sign. The weeds grow up in the summer, so you can't even read it. Beyond that sign, there are about 10,000 other signs selling other products. But then the font is so bad. I'm a stickler, I guess, for fonts, but fonts kind of give a sense of your degree of aesthetic sophistication. There are a lot of fonts out there. There are a lot of great fonts out there. Who picked this one? In fact, we live in a golden age of fonts because of the internet. But I challenge you, right around Delaware, look at our civic buildings. The fonts increasingly are terrible, in spite of all the new exciting options. What's the civic gateway like for Newcastle, Delaware? Newcastle is our treasure trove, so you think that you're going to see something kind of lovely as you approach Newcastle. You already probably know where this is going. The approach to Newcastle is famously bad. You pass William Penn High School. How have they never landscaped this property in like the 60 years that it's been encumbering the earth with its architectural mediocrity? And then further on is the Baptist church that looks kind of like Noah's Ark if it's floating in a sea of asphalt. Not so good. That's Newcastle. How about Wilmington? How does Wilmington fare in terms of civic gateways? Well, you come in on 52 from Greenville into Wilmington, and there's that building on the left. Now, I try to defend modernism, but there's something not right about the design of this building. Is it that at some point they tore out all the windows and put in these blank void-like windows, or is it the crudeness of the materials? Modernism only works if you're really careful about the materials. The material, you're not allowed to use ornament, so you've got to have good materials. And these seem like they're crumbling before our eyes. Wilmington coming in from the south, or this is the southern portal, I guess, Market Street Bridge, and they've built the new condominium towers right on the Christina River. I think the condominium towers are attractive, but what were they thinking with that parking garage? Wouldn't you put the parking garage on the back of the building so that everybody has a view of the water? But instead, the parking deck's right on the river, and it's clad in huge sheets of steel. I mean, it just looks like some sort of East European Stasi prison as you go right over Market Street. How about Newark? Well, the portal to Newark is Kirkwood Highway, and people that were complaining about the local architectural community was complaining about the ugliness of Kirkwood Highway in 1962. This building has always puzzled me on Kirkwood Highway. Why would you build a high-rise on Kirkwood Highway. Repeated attempts to reach the owner of the building to ask him that question have failed. So it's going to remain a mystery. For years, I thought this could be the ugliest building in Delaware, but then they spruced it up and they painted it so it doesn't look quite so bad. Although in crazy quirky fashion, they've only replaced the windows on the first 2 floors. So the windows don't match as you go up. But I'm glad to say if you go around the back, you get the full flavor of the original mysteriously unadorned design of this strange little building. Now, as you come further into Newark, you pass the Newark United States Post Office in Newark, Delaware. No, wait, hold on. No, that's not the United States Post Office in Newark, Delaware. This is, come on, I challenge you, send me a picture of a worse post office in any community in this country. Can there be any worse post office than this one? So just as you've recovered from the site of this, you drive a little further into Newark and you pass the Verizon substation that looms over Main Street, and they've cut down all the trees that formerly screened this from our horrified sight. Now, right behind this was the library, and only pointed out because, you know, they tore off the original lettering and they added the new lettering, which is in that same grossly unimaginative font. Why these fonts? And the caption there says the library is asking readers to return all their books before the building is demolished. A curious request. Anyway, they're building a new one. I'm sure it's going to look good. Frightful and surprising places. That is something you don't expect to see in an otherwise beautiful setting. For example, in the Highlands or in the Delaware Avenue Historic District, all those nifty old Queen Anne houses and all the different architectural materials and the shingles and the tiles. And it's just such fun. And then there in the middle of it is that 1950s intrusion, the apartment tower, another gift of Le Corbusier, actually. Look how out of scale in the historic district, in the middle of the historic district, is this 1950s apartment block. And that big black square, that's only 1/3 of the actual building. So as I walk around and I'm studying the old architecture, always in the background is looming this behemoth. You turn a corner, there it is again. It's just inescapable. And there it is. The only blessing here is that apparently they ran out of money in the campaign to destroy the entire historic district and replace it completely with these apartment towers. And believe me, in the 1950s, if they could have, they would have torn down every Victorian building and rebuilt it shiny and new. Some of the infill newer architecture in these neighborhoods doesn't, to me, quite have the charm of the original Queen Anne architecture. The Queen Anne feeling for materials, which is always sublime. I think that masonry house on the left doesn't really understand that, you know, a stone house couldn't have a garage door. You know, how are you going to hold the wall up if those are stones? And the shape of it, the shape of the house seems designed to fill the lot with the maximum square footage. Clearly not the goal of the Queen Anne architect. Westover Hills, full of beautiful, what the British call stockbroker Tudor houses of the 1930s. Westover Hills, famously elegant. And then there's this one. Maybe like me, you've driven by this one in Westover and you've scratched your head of how did they ever build this one? This is most unusual. You know, a house typically would have signals that it's a house. For example, shutters. There are no shutters. Chimney, no chimney. Enormous garage. This one, I just don't quite understand. How about the Brandywine? Surely nobody would introduce some visual intrusion along the Brandywine, right? The Brandywine is our sacred Arcadia, the most significant cultural and ecological site, perhaps in all of Delaware. Surely this is sacred ground. Nobody would mess with the Brandywine. No, wait, in fact, they've built condominiums. Condominiums are not beside the Brandywine, they're actually in the Brandywine. I find that very uncivic and very unecological. Down at Trap Pond. Trap Pond is in the middle of nowhere. This is in Sussex County. There's nothing around Trap Pond. Miles and miles of cornfields. And somebody is building a housing development right on the property line of the state park. They could have built these houses anywhere, and they're building them right on the property line of the state park. That to me is an intrusion that is, to me, a bit shocking. How about architectural mixed metaphors? What is a mixed metaphor? Well, a mixed metaphor is agglomerations of things that really actually don't quite go together. This summer at a state fair in Pennsylvania, we saw a terrific mixed metaphor. It was Amish camel rides. So mixed metaphors are all around, and we have mixed metaphors in architecture. For example, what if you took a Le Corbusier solar screen, modernist, 1950s, like you see there on the top, sort of bleeding edge, modernistic innovation of the 1950s. And what if you combined that? What if you did like a mashup of that with Gunston Hall in Virginia? The old colonial, venerable, vintage house. Now you're saying no one. You're saying, Professor Maynard, no one would do that. Oh, yes, they would. Oh, yes, they would do that. The second floor is Le Corbusier, and the ground floor is Gunston Hall. You'll see mixed metaphors in lots of places. This is on Concord Pike. This was taken a few years ago. Now, this is not an important building. This is a very ordinary 1960s curtain wall commercial building. It was a nicely preserved example of 1960s modernism with a concrete projecting screen between the first and the second floors, like almost a shed-like projection, and a nifty curtain wall. This has been grotesquely altered in order to eliminate the modernist characteristics, so that the curtain wall has been destroyed and replaced by miscellaneous lettering. The concrete sunshade has been thickened. But weirdest of all, it's like a Chester County barn has been slammed up against the end of the building with this faux stonework. The original architect is revolving in his or her grave at the site of this alteration. Architectural guilty pleasures. Now, there's some frightful buildings that I have fallen in love with. These are the ones that are so bad they are good. And that in this category are thousands of the 1950s houses in North Wilmington. You know, North Wilmington was one of the most explosively developing places in the country at maybe the worst possible time in the 1950s. So zoning is minimal and environmental laws are non-existent. And many of the houses are just awful looking. But every now and then I find one that I just think that is great. Like this green one. This green one near the Pennsylvania line, near Arden. It's got its original asbestos shingles. It's got a TV aerial on the roof, which I love. It's got this hideous downspout that comes down and really ruins the whole concept of the modernist roof line. But this is one of these that I just really think is great, and I hope they don't fix it up. I really like this one, the Hatzel and Bueller Electrical Company headquarters in North Wilmington. It's about 1970, and I like this kind of thing. It's really experimental. It's really inventive. You've got what should be roof shingles, but they cover the whole wall. Real cedar shaped shingles, neat materials. You've got brown bricks. You've got pebbled concrete lintels over the doors. You've got bronze windows. It's very carefully thought out for a quite small, quite modest building. If you hate modernism, you'll be glad that this one has just been radically altered. And I think not in a way that is conducive to me wanting to see it again. I like the Delaware Community Center. I never knew this existed. Going around the state gives you a chance to see things that you never would otherwise encounter. This one, 1960s, again, it's got these tilted up concrete slabs that form the entire wall that face out those strange projecting windows. And it's got a great font, Cheltenham font of the 60s. Let's bring back these great fonts. And I kind of like the one I showed you earlier, which is the Division of Forensic Sciences building in Wilmington. So, should this building be a pretty building, given that they dissect corpses inside? The ugliness kind of goes with the territory. I think it's kind of works here that this building is savagely unattractive. It's kind of neat, though, how the windows are designed so that nobody can ever see inside to know actually what's going on. It is so bad, it's really kind of good. And, being a font person, this is a really terrible font, but I have a soft spot in my heart for whoever paid for all the extra punctuation here at the Ellendale Fire Company, period, comma, number period 1, comma, incorporated, period. So what's the most frightful building in Delaware? Last time I spoke to y'all, I told you what I thought it might be. But then I reconsidered and I thought, I really need to revisit this subject. I need to go back. And what I've been doing for the last year is I get up in the morning and I go drive around, and I have revisited, I have seen every building in Delaware again. I've seen them all. I've viewed them all. And we're going to see here what is the most frightful building in Delaware. Is it Smith Hall at the University of Delaware? Now, I know many of you expected this, and I just don't think I can quite give the title to Smith Hall. It's just, I guess I've had so many classes in Smith Hall that it's kind of grown on me. This would be a runner-up, a definite runner-up. Is the worst building in Delaware Trolley Square? It's bad. It's mostly bad for those green railings. Would it be so terrible if they weren't green? So, I'm not sure this is truly bad. It's the green. Is it that red roof that they've added in Centerville? In the middle of the Centerville Historic District, this red metal roof that you can see from the International Space Station. Is this the worst? Well, I don't think this is the worst, but this would go in the frightful and surprising places category. Is it that condominium complex that sticks out into the Brandywine? And I'd really thought long and hard. For several months, I considered that this might be the very worst. But then that hurricane flooded the complex. The Brandywine took its revenge. And I thought, no, it would be a pile-on to fault this building. So no, it's not this one. Is it the entire governmental complex in downtown Wilmington? And I almost want to say, yeah, maybe this is the architectural hits of the state of Delaware. But no, I don't think it's this. I don't think it's this. I think there's something even worse. I think there's something cosmically bad. Is it Gouger Cobb School? Could be. This is such a contender. This is such a contender. Imagine sending your young ones to study and to be educated in this cement box. It's not Gouger Cobb's. It is the Floyd I. Hudson State Service Center. as I told you last year, I have revisited everything. The Floyd I. Hudson State Service Center retains its crown as the ugliest building in the state of Delaware. Now, I had one hesitation. I thought, I have vilified this building, but I've never been around the back. Maybe the back is terrific. So here it is, folks. I went around the back, and the back is just as bad, if not slightly worse, than the front. So there it is, Preservation, Delaware, the worst building in the state, one of the worst buildings in the country, and it's in Newark, Delaware, the Floyd I. Hudson State Service Center. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Barksdale. You had some very funny moments in there. So I'm going to ask you in a sec to step back to the AstraZeneca Rollins building
You
because
have a thing about that. I
because
know.
I learned some additional facts that are very appropriate to Halloween about it. Um,
I'm going to find that picture. I don't know
okay.
if I can. Go all the way back.
And we do have a question. I'm not going to, I will come to that next. But I thought you would enjoy the little story that goes with the John Rollins building. Which one was built?
There it is, Rollins. Yeah.
Yes. It dominated the landscape in many ways. Rollins' intent was to create in the city of Wilmington. He was not very welcome there as a truck driver. Found the land, built it. AstraZeneca, as you know, whose buildings are in the background of the building, uh, acquired it for office space. And I learned about 2005, they had to repair the concrete surface of the building. It was spalling badly. This is a problem that does happen in preservation of concrete buildings. And once that coating was reapplied, they thought it would help to soften its color by painting it the same as the other buildings that they had. So that was the intent of going to the Sienna Brown. The helicopter pad on top was always a problem for neighbors with the noise that it brought. And over time, the fire suppression systems and the fuel containment system up there were deemed no longer adequate for it to be used. Well, turns out that a Hollywood studio wanted to use the top of the building to film a movie. And they were willing to come in and pay for all of those necessary repairs to the top of the Rollins building so a helicopter could land on it and they could film it. The problem was commercial helicopters about 5,000 pounds, but the movie studio wanted to use a Black Hawk helicopter that weighs 3 times that. And the building was never going to be able to support it, so the project never went forward. But you're going to ask, what was the name of the movie? And it was The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which starred Nicole Kidman and Daniel Craig. So there's a Halloween story to
You
finish
have
off
outdone
that building.
yourself with Delaware lore. I had never heard that. That is an incredible story.
Thank you to a friend, Jewish Community Center, who was vice president of facilities in all buildings at AstraZeneca at the time, and he had to live through that. We do have a question I do want to get to. So, Barksdale, they are asking your thoughts on the new presidential ballroom that has been added to the White House. Its volume and size seem to overpower the rest of the building and impact its historical significance. The question is, where were the reviews, applications, or opportunity for public comment?
This is one of the strangest cases I've ever seen. Ordinarily, to have made that kind of alteration, I mean, look at Kucha's Bridge, where it's been years of planning to put in a parking lot you know, and all the permitting and what did he say, $800,000 of archaeology just to put in the parking lot. Where was the archaeology at the White House? Where was the landscape review? Where was any of that? Like, what happened to the whole process that we built up over decades of review? As you say, this should have taken years to plan, and yet it seemed like he announced the thing, and about 2 weeks later, they were tearing half of the White House down. It's in blinding speed. I will say this, though, I sort of lost interest in the White House, given that what Truman did to the White House in 1950 was obscene. I mean, Harry Truman literally gutted the White House like a bomb had hit it down to the walls. I mean, a thing that Hitler would have loved to have done in World War II, we did it ourselves to our own White House. And so ever since that, I've had this very sort of skeptical feeling that the White House always seems to get it wrong. So I guess that's my only real thought.
Okay. Another question for Greg. What were the things that you team might have learned about John Dickinson plantation?
Oop, sorry, Gene, that's
oh,
from the last
From the
presentation.
previous one? Thank you. Yep. See that. Okay. No open questions. Any others anyone wants to chime in on this? Okay, I don't see any coming up. So, Barksdale, thank you again. You always
Thank you,
bring
Gene.
some
Thanks so much
really
for planning this, making this possible.
Absolutely. And to the rest of the audience, again, if you have the opportunity tomorrow, join us at the Blue Wall Barn for our in-person annual meeting. Reservations are available in the chat. Just take a look at those. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Barksdale and Jean. Up next, we will have Kim Burdick on the Hale Burns House, and that's at 1:20.